Welcome to Maximus Live, episode 63. Hope everyone is having a wonderful last day of March. Thank you for everyone who's joining us on Instagram Live, YouTube Live, and Twitter Spaces. We're playing around with our platforms a little bit. I'm your host, Dr. Cam, and this is an hour dedicated every Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. to maximizing your testosterone. So every week we start out with a weekly unpopular opinion talking about the relevancy of recent affairs with health and hormones. And then I do live health coaching. So my background is I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and professor of psychiatry at a major medical school. And so I work with top performing CEOs, athletes, and other elite clientele in order to maximize their health and performance. So if you have any questions about how to maximize your health in terms of your diet, exercise, sleep, focus, or relationships, I'm happy to field any questions. All right, so why don't we start out this week's unpopular opinion with the big controversy that's happening. If anyone watched the Oscars or at least saw the unfortunate highlights about the Will Smith Chris Rock assault, and I'm going to call it an assault because that's basically what it was. It wasn't just a slap in the face. And my unpopular opinion is that Will Smith was not defending his family's honor, and it's not an example of toxic masculinity. It's actually an example of the lack of masculinity. So let's talk about what happened. If you didn't see the slap heard round the world, Will Smith was very offended at a joke that Chris Rock made regarding Jada Pinkett Smith, his wife's hair loss. So the interesting thing, by the way, is the media was like, "Oh, it's a medical condition. It's alopecia. That's an immune condition, and it's very insensitive for Chris Rock to make fun of someone's medical condition." So first of all, let me say, as a healthcare practitioner that works with patients, and I'm obviously deeply sensitive to not making fun of people or stigmatizing people because of their medical condition. I think there is a difference, though, in terms of conditions like making fun of someone who has cancer versus, the press has been calling it alopecia, which is the correct medical terminology. But alopecia is hair loss, right? Probably a quarter of women, maybe 3/4 of men, really roughly speaking, suffer from hair loss. So it's not like we're talking about some rare medical condition that we have to be super sort of sensitive to. Everyone, myself included, like, your hair falls out when you get old. I don't think that's an unusual thing. And not to say that justifies being made fun of, but I do think it's important to recognize that it's not an extreme situation here. It's a shared experience that the majority of people, lose their hair when they get older, and it's not a ridiculous thing. Like, has no one ever heard a bald joke in their life? So first of all, I think comedians, quite frankly, get a free pass from our society in order to make fun of things. And they should, in fact, be able to be make fun of things that are taboo. It's very different if a doctor is making fun of a patient. I would, of course, never do that. But I think it's pretty fair game that a stand-up comedian, given that's their job, can make light of that. But that aside, whether you think it's fair or unfair to make fun of someone's looks or health conditions, even in the context of stand-up comedy, the question is, was that an appropriate response? And I don't think there's any, equivocalness when it comes to the fact that violence is never okay, right? I think even Will Smith himself obviously apologized after the incident. The Academy Awards is, considering punitive action against, Will, given that what he did. I actually, by the way, think it was a tremendous tragedy that the Academy allowed him to stay. Now, they said, "Oh, we tried to kick him out," but I'm like, listen, you have bodyguards. This is the biggest event, in LA every single year. Are you telling me you couldn't escort him out? If you assault someone at a bar or a club, it doesn't matter if you're a celebrity or not. You are going to get taken out by the bodyguards, no matter who you are. They let him stay because they knew that he was obviously going to win an Oscar, and they wanted him to have his speech. And unfortunately, by doing so, they literally condone violence. Let's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, ultimately, though, let's just talk about the masculine response. And I think this is really important because there are some people defending Will Smith including, interestingly, his children. I think they tweeted something like, "Oh, this is how we do it," defending my family's honor. And some, a little bit more traditionalists. I've even seen some women defending Will Smith, saying, "Well, if someone went after me, I'd want my man to protect my honor." And I think this is a really important distinction that we're talking about here. Now, it is important for a man to be a protector, right? If someone is coming after you and harming your physical integrity, going to assault you, mug you, sexually assault you, you do want a man who can protect you and even resort to physical means if necessary in self-defense. But this is not self-defense. This is not protecting your woman. You're sitting there, as a person who, has $250 million, one of the most famous, movie actors in Hollywood, sitting there having a good time at the Oscars here, right? We're not talking about a dark, crowded alley. And by the way, Will Smith laughed at the joke, by the way, if you watch the replay, until he looked at his wife's face and she was obviously upset and felt the need to supposedly defend her honor. And obviously go after Chris Rock. So I think you can't say it's just about sort of defending his wife, because there is a difference between defending someone physically and defending their honor. But even if you're really old school chivalrous, you believe in sort of the genteel standard of defending someone's honor, there's another thing to be able to go up and do that in an appropriate way. Now, let's say if Will Smith had gone up and instead of slapping Chris Rock said, "Hey, I understand that you're a comedian, this is a joke, but maybe you shouldn't make fun of people's medical conditions." Or more appropriately, if he had done that when he had had the opportunity to get up and give his Oscar address and say, "Hey, look, I want to bring attention to this medical condition. Men have balding commonly, but, it's less appreciated in women. And, this is my personal opinion about where we draw the line." That would have been an appropriate way to defend honor and say, I respect Chris, this is my friend, but I think he crossed the line here, and this is why I want to raise public awareness about this issue. That is what a gentleman does. That's true chivalry. That's defending your wife's honor, is you fight words with words. You don't fight it with fists or certainly an open hand. And I think is absolutely, completely unjustified that he went and assaulted, quite frankly, Chris Rock. And I think it's a terrible tragedy that, the Academy essentially condoned it. Now, good for Chris Rock for being the bigger man and choosing not to pursue it in terms of, filing charges. I think other people, Jim Carrey talked about how he would have actually sued him in response. But, the thing that's interesting to me and that I want to highlight as a psychologist, some people might interpret this incident for political reasons and say, isn't this an example of toxic masculinity that we're talking about here? This is when testosterone is coursing through your veins and that aggression causes you to engage in physical assault. And that's the myth that I want to dispel. First of all, the whole roid rage myth that higher testosterone is associated with physical violence, aggression, and assault is not true. In fact, there's interventional studies that show that when you get guys who have low testosterone and you correct their testosterone imbalance by doing appropriate hormone replacement, meaning you're getting them into a normal, high normal physiological range. We're not talking about bodybuilders here. That's a different thing. That is actually steroid or drug abuse. But when you correct people's testosterone to a high normal range, here's the interesting thing. They don't become more aggressive. They become friendlier. Their mood gets better regulated. And so what actually happens is they become think about guys who are naturally high testosterone. They're the strong and silent type. They're not screaming out twice like Will Smith is, talking about keep my lady's, name out of your mouth. So contrary to the myth, testosterone is associated with calmness and actually friendliness. Because here's the thing, if you're secure in your masculinity, you're a high testosterone, you're a so-called alpha male, you don't need to go and prove to the world that, I'm the defender of honor, right? A bigger man, the mature man, would laugh it off. You know what I mean? Or like I said, if it truly kind of gets under your craw, you can go and spread public awareness about why you think that's not an appropriate thing, right? But you be like Denzel Washington, who was the mature man. He was the alpha male in the situation and said, let me arbitrate this situation and find a way to find peace, right? That, I think Denzel was the true male role model that was in this particular situation. And so to me, his behavior is not an indication of toxic masculinity. That it's an indication of toxic behavior. The behavior was absolutely toxic. It was absolutely, or I should say, inappropriate. I don't love the word toxic because it's become this meaningless term. The behavior was inappropriate, and it actually stems from a lack of masculinity. Now, we can't speculate why Will did that. Violence is not something that's easily predictable, but I think it can be speculated that a lot of this is due to the emasculation epidemic that we're seeing, and this specific emasculation that happened in the red table conversation that Will and Jada Pinkett Smith had, right? Jada had an affair essentially on Will and publicly embarrassed him. And a lot of people, quite frankly, were kind of appalled. Like, why are they dragging out their personal sexual affairs in public and, emasculating Will? And I think Will, like any man would, experienced a lot of public criticism and shame, quite frankly, for being cuckolded by his wife in terms of being, cheated upon by a younger man. And so I think, this is my personal speculation, it wasn't about defending his wife's honor. It was about, this was a narcissistic reaction to the shame that Will Smith felt in terms of being emasculated as a man. He felt less than as a man. He felt, look, my wife is sleeping with another younger, more alpha male, and I need to prove to the world that I'm still a man, that I'm still a boss. And so that's not toxic masculinity. That's a lack of masculinity. That's immature behavior, right? Because if you are secure, healthy, high testosterone male, you're not going to go and have to overcompensate or try to prove anything to anyone, right? So my interpretation as a psychologist is this is a lack of masculinity that you're seeing. And this is why the world needs healthy masculinity. You need Denzel Washington stepping in and telling and whispering in Will's ear, hey, when you're at your highest, this is when the devil comes after you. That is sage advice. That's what you would want your father to say, and say, don't embarrass yourself and your family in front of the world, right? So I think it's unfortunate if anyone concludes that this is about toxic masculinity, when really this is about a real lack of masculinity. And to just bring it full circle, here's an interesting scientific physiological note to this. When people engage in testosterone replacement therapy, right, they're injecting testosterone, one of the interesting things that happens is that it shuts off the neurosteroid cascade that starts with cholesterol, right? That's the kind of the progenitor of all of your steroid hormones, which you consume in things like eggs and shrimp. Cholesterol turns into pregnenolone, which turns into progesterone, which turns into allopregnanolone and other hormones, DHEA, estradiol, and testosterone. That's sort of the natural neurosteroid cascade. But here's the thing, because TRT is an artificial thing, you're bypassing the system by injecting external testosterone. One of the interesting side effects is it decreases one of those intermediate hormones, which is called allopregnanolone. Allopregnanolone is a very important neurosteroid in that it's a positive allosteric modulator of the GABA receptor, which is just a really fancy word for saying GABA is the system that things like alcohol or Xanax binds with that calms us down. And so if you think about it, if you take TRT and you decrease your allopregnanolone, which is the soothing neurosteroid, you're more likely to become aggressive. And that's interestingly what that's what the research literature shows, is that, when you mess with that neurosteroid cascade, in some instances, if it creates a deficiency in allopregnanolone, that may be the mediator of some of the aggressive behavior that you see when you go too high on your testosterone replacement therapy. That's why, interestingly, what we're doing is such an important and different approach, in that, unlike TRT, we are stimulating your own natural testosterone production. And when you do that, you're not shutting off that initial neurosteroid cascade. Shouldn't cause a decrease in allopregnanolone, and as a result, shouldn't cause a decrease or it shouldn't cause affect sort of aggressive behavior. So that's why we really believe in sort of this natural approach to testosterone optimization. We call it testosterone maximization. It's really important, as you see, to not just have your hormones optimal for your body in terms of being able to put on lean mass and muscle, but it's important for the psychological effects, because when your neurochemicals and neurosteroids are kind of thrown off, you can be more likely to engage in impulsive behavior like Will Smith did, or potentially aggressive behavior, as we unfortunately saw. And so I am always very cautious as a psychologist and psychiatry professor. Be careful of what chemicals that you're putting in your body, especially ones that cross the blood-brain barrier, because they are psychoactive. They influence how we think, feel, and behave. And so that's why we really are taking a very, thoughtful and conservative approach here at Maximus in terms of, we do, use pharmaceutical protocols that do have psychological effects, but for better outcomes and better effects, as opposed to stuff that can throw you off and make you act out of character or unfortunately out of line. Now, I have no idea what medications Will Smith is on, or quite frankly, if he should be on them. That's up to him and his psychiatrist. But I do think, unfortunately, he could use some therapy at the very least. And it's a really sad and tragic incident to see. But that's my unpopular opinion. Will Smith's behavior is about a lack of masculinity. And I think this is exactly why we're doing what we're doing here at Maximus, because the world needs positive masculine role models. That's why I'm here talking about, my opinion. Not that I'm a perfect human being. I'm perfectly flawed myself. But at least the world needs mature men standing up and saying, look, violence is wrong. There's better ways to obviously resolve it. And, there's a better way. All right, questions from our listeners.
We had this question via Discord. You answered it in the chat, but it'd be good to go over this topic. In Maximus Live number 44, you talked at the end about being careful about talking about your stress and anxiety with your loved one. I think this is a fair point. What would be a healthy or non-destructive way of communicating to your partner that you are in a less than optimal condition, as to not give your partner the wrong impression, i.e. you being silent, being misconstrued as being mad at your partner, and something like that?
Yeah, that is a really great question. What channel was this on, Victor? Was this on the
dating channel?
I was on the dating channel. I think I actually answered this question online, but I want to just share it with the audience, right? So one of our community members was talking about, and by the way, I'm glad someone listening to this show 20 episodes ago, about how do you share your stress and anxiety with your loved one. And I really want to explain the nuance behind this point, because I don't want people to misunderstand and say that I'm advocating withholding from your partner, okay? Intimacy requires shared vulnerability. It's really, really critical to have a partner that you trust deeply and is also open enough to share your deepest concerns with. If not, then you don't have a normal attachment style. By the way, this is something I'm going to do an aside for a quick second. It's really important for all men listening to this to understand what your attachment style is. You can do a little Google search. I believe there's a site called the Attachment Project. You can take a little quiz, and it talks about how's your relationship with your mother, how's your relationship with your father, and how's your relationship with your partner, either past or present. And it'll give you a pretty good understanding of, or do you have a secure attachment style in which you can have healthy relationships, or do you have more of an avoidant attachment style in which you keep people at arm's length, or an anxious attachment style in which you're more dependent on other people. It highly influences the dynamics of your relationship, and if you do have a little bit more of an extreme avoidant or anxious style, it'll cause problems in your relationship. So what we're talking about here is, sometimes people can go too far in terms of having a too anxious attachment style in which they're just spilling out everything. And of course you want to be able to have someone you can share your concerns with. But I always say as a psychologist, I believe in radical acceptance. I believe in radical responsibility, but I do not believe in radical honesty. And the reason for that is not everyone has the psychological resilience, I don't think even most people do, to handle every single bit of truth in the world. You have to be selective about what you share if your partner cannot handle the news. And there's also a time and a place for things, right? If you're like running out the door, it's not the time to have a deep conversation. If it's someone's birthday, maybe it's not the appropriate venue to have that conversation. That I think is pretty reasonable. And so you have to be kind of wise and be like, when is it appropriate, where is it appropriate, and honestly, there are some things that are inappropriate to share. If your wife's asking if she looks good in the dress, the answer is almost always going to be yes. So you have to understand when something is going to create undue stress in their life. If the burden of carrying what you're sharing basically exceeds their coping abilities. Okay, and I always tell men, you can't use your partner as your therapist. Yes, share your concerns, but it's not their role to solve them for you, or certainly to heal your trauma. That's your responsibility. And so you can say, hey, look, I'm dealing with a depression, or I have a lot of anxiety, so they know what's going on. But go to a licensed psychologist to deal with that. It's not the burden of your friends and family to treat you. Now, they can offer their emotional support, their moral support, and do their best in whatever way they can, but you can't kind of put all of the weight onto their shoulders. So that I think is really important. Is like, look, you got to like spread the load, right? It can't be all on your shoulders, but it certainly can't be all on your partner's either, right? Go find a psychologist, go find a doctor. You have other friends and family, and I really actually think the biggest benefit of male friends and male companionship is to do just that, right? You can talk about this, especially with male companions, because they obviously have a unique lens into the male psyche. No one can really understand, especially the professional stress and burdens like your male colleagues would, that your partner just can't do in the same way. And that way, you can vent, you can get it out, you can problem solve with your buddies, or at least have a beer and share your woes with them. And so your partner doesn't have to bear it alone. So net, what I'm trying to say here is like, obviously be very open. You want to be vulnerable with your partner. You want to be able to share almost everything, I would say. But it's a matter of, is it 100%? And if there's certain things, especially when they start to fall into treatment, you want to obviously handle that with professionals. And there's also some stuff that's just about the male experience that you want to share with your male friends. So spread the load amongst, like I said, your friends, your professionals, etc. And so that when you're with your partner, you're like, I have dealt with this. I have taken care of myself in terms of my self-care, and I can be present with you. I'll alert you to what's going on, so that you're aware, that we have transparency. Hey, like, I'm telling you I'm going to therapy, or I'm getting some drinks with my guy friends and I'm catching up, but that you don't have to carry this burden by yourself. And it's your job as a man to have the psychological insight and maturity to decide when and where that is.
Thank you for your response. We have another question, different topic via YouTube. Does taking enclomiphene indefinitely taper down its efficacy and would require higher doses as time passes? How does it affect vision long term?
Yeah, great question. So the question is about enclomiphene, which is our flagship drug that we use as part of the King Protocol. Now the question is, does tolerance build? Meaning that if you continue to take it, do you need to take higher and higher dosages? And the answer is no, right? Some medications, the ones that are particularly addictive, have qualities that require tolerance. So like an example would be the opioids, right? So prescription pain medications who are in the opioid family need higher, often if you're taking like an oxycodone or something like that, higher and higher dosages to have the same therapeutic effect, the same pain relief. That's not true for a lot of other medications. You can take the same allergy medications, the tolerance doesn't build. Same is true for enclomiphene. There's no indication that any tolerance develops. There's multi-year studies of Clomid, its parent drug, in which there's no effects of tolerance. And because, like I said, the mechanism of action is that it's blocking the estrogen receptors, which stimulates your body to produce more of its own testosterone, there's no indication of tolerance developing. So it can be taken indefinitely as long as you're not experiencing any side effects, which are really rare anyway, that you can basically take it safely forever. Now, the second part of that question is there any issues with vision? Now, that's the difference between Clomid and enclomiphene. Clomid, the parent drug, is comprised of about 62% enclomiphene and 38% zuclomiphene. Zuclomiphene is an estrogen agonist. It basically acts like an estrogen in the body, And that may have some ocular effects in a small percentage of people. So some people, and they're also taking huge dosages, they're taking 25, 50 milligrams of Clomid, experience visual disturbances. They may get floaters or some retinal issues, but those issues discontinue as soon as you stop taking the medication, right? So they're not like long-term damage or effects. For the most part, they can just, if you're experiencing some weird vision issues, just stop taking Clomid. But that's why we don't prescribe Clomid. We prescribe Enclomiphene. Enclomiphene has filtered out the zuclomiphene isomer, so you just get that pure Enclomiphene agonist, and there's zero suggestion from the research literature that it has the same visual effects. It seems to be lacking. It seems to be that really it's that zuclomiphene isomer that's causing most of the side effects in terms of the visual, the emotional, libido effects that you hear with Clomid. And Clomiphene is really like a pure, almost side effect free version of it. And certainly we have not ever heard of any, at least amongst our patient base, any issues with visual disturbances. So the other thing too is we're using, remember, very, very low dosages. Most of our clientele are on 6.25, sometimes 12.5 milligrams of Enclomiphene. That's much lower than the 25 to 50 milligrams of Clomid that I mentioned that sometimes in rare instances can cause those visual disturbances. So it's not a problem because quite frankly, it's a different drug altogether. Over time, Clomid is basically zuclomiphene, while Enclomiphene, it almost has the opposite effect as a receptor antagonist versus agonist. And finally, there's no indication in either the research literature nor clinical practice that it has any visual issues or disturbances. So it's pretty safe.
We got this question via Discord. Will taking sertraline 25 milligrams for PE have any effect on the protocol that you know of?
Sertraline, right? Yeah. So sertraline is an SSRI. It's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It's originally FDA approved as a depression treatment. This is based on the monoamine hypothesis of depression that serotonin is the happiness neurotransmitter, and if you increase it, you'll cure your depression. I think that's a stupidly simplistic model, not necessarily true. Here's the interesting thing. People forget that medications are not for any particular indication. They get approved by the FDA for any particular indication. So we call SSRIs antidepressants. But the reality is it's just a chemical. And we decide what we use that chemical for and what the FDA approves it for in terms of what it's actually effective for. So what's interesting is you can use sertraline what's called off-label, meaning it's not FDA approved for that reason, but it has other effects. So funnily, and this is a really funny story. So when, if you can at least have a sense of humor about sexual problems, the folks that are taking sertraline for depression found that they get a side effect, and that side effect is anorgasmia, which is a fancy term for they have a hard time having an orgasm, right? It delays orgasm, which is not great because, at least one of the last joys of life when you're depressed is having sex. And if you can't have an orgasm, life is less fun. Now, that's a side effect. That's a problem. Or is it? Because if you're the type of guy who has premature ejaculation, delaying your orgasm is a benefit. So that's the really funny irony. Like, is it a side effect or is it a solution? Well, I guess it depends on the guy and what you're using it for. So sertraline, you mentioned taking 25 milligrams, is now commonly a treatment for premature ejaculation. In fact, Hims, one of the other telemedicine companies, prescribes it off-label for that purpose. It does work. I honestly think it's a very crude, blunt force solution. I do not recommend using SSRIs for premature ejaculation because here's why. It does work, but how does it work? It works by reducing penile sensitivity, right? When your penis is less sensitive, of course you'll take longer to have sex and you'll delay orgasm, but you're not enjoying the pleasure as much. You want sensitivity. The even cruder approach that these companies like Roe or Hims takes, they sell you lidocaine wipes. It literally numbs your dick. And I think it's a bizarre way of treating premature ejaculation. Like, of course, you can just put on like a really thick condom or basically not feel anything in your penis. That's almost a backward solution. The real, root cause, the real sophisticated way to treat premature ejaculation. Well, let me answer your question first. Does it have any contraindications with our protocol? No. You can take your sertraline. There should be no effect with the enclomiphene. So it shouldn't be a problem. But, just kind of watch it, I would say, because you're already kind of delaying your orgasm too much. Sometimes messing with the estrogen receptors, if you take too high of a dosage of enclomiphene, may lower libido. So just see how it mixes with your own biochemistry. But there's no inherent contraindication with taking it. There's no actually known contraindications with enclomiphene with any drug, quite frankly. The only thing was we exclude folks who are on blood thinners like Coumadin and warfarin, but that's actually because of the vitamin K, not the enclomiphene. Now, back to what I was saying. What's the proper treatment for premature ejaculation? The proper treatment for premature ejaculation is not a drug. That's why we don't offer premature ejaculation medications. The proper treatment is behavioral. So what I encourage you to do is Google Masters and Johnson squeeze technique. And this is a technique, it's been empirically validated in the research literature, in which you can actually train yourself to delay orgasm, which is the proper way of doing it. What you want is to maintain your penile sensitivity. You want it to be sensitive so you can enjoy, obviously, the exquisite pleasure of intercourse. You just don't want to come too early, obviously. You want to be able to come, well, quite frankly, when you want to, or when you've pleasured your partner, ideally enough. So what you need to do is to train your body is that when you get too excited is not to orgasm too quickly. And so the Masters and Johnson squeeze technique is you get yourself to the brink of orgasm, whether through solo masturbation with a partner or having sexual intercourse. And just before you orgasm, maybe not on the brink of where you can't control it, but let's say you're getting there. You can tell it's coming, let's say 5 to 15 seconds before. You want to squeeze the head of the penis so that the blood flow gets out of the penis. And what that does is obviously when you extricate all the blood out, the sensitivity temporarily reduces and you're not going to orgasm. And so what you're doing is basically getting to the brink of orgasm, squeezing the blood out, getting back to the brink, squeezing the blood out, getting back to the brink, squeezing the blood out. So you're repeating this a couple times until you probably can't stand anymore and then you can't help yourself and you're going to orgasm. But it teaches you to delay orgasm. It works really well, and it's kind of behavioral training to say, I can get to the brink without going over the waterfall, so to speak, right? I can get close to the edge but control myself, right? And you want to practice this. And like I said, you can practice it on your own with masturbation. You can obviously do it with the support of your partner, but it works really well, and it's the proper thing to do. Because why would you want to take an SSRI for the rest of your life? It's kind of a shitty medication, has some potential other side effects, black box warning, just to be able to do something that you can clearly train yourself to do. Now, listen, if testosterone was the same way, if there was some squeeze technique that increased your testosterone, I'd be telling people the same, but there's not. When it comes to testosterone boosting, it obviously makes sense to take enclomiphene. There's nothing that will double your testosterone like a pharmaceutical medication. That's where it makes sense to take medication. When it comes to premature ejaculation, it really makes sense to do the behavioral technique because it works better than any medication. While if you're taking into account maintaining your penile sensitivity, which is obviously really important because sex has to be pleasurable. So yes, you can take your sertraline for it, but if you're just taking sertraline for PE, I would encourage you to talk to your provider about coming off of it if the behavioral technique works better. If you're taking it for antidepressant reasons, that's a different thing, and obviously work with your PCP or psychiatrist around that.
We had a follow-up from the question before about taking enclomiphene long term. My hematocrit levels are always above 50. Can I take 6.25 milligram of enclomiphene daily? How does it negatively affect T2DM?
T2DM? Can I take a look at that? Mellitus. That's probably what they're referring to. If your hematocrit levels run borderline high, what I would just suggest is go on your own, and because you know that you've had a lab test, that's how you would know that. Just monitor your hematocrit levels. Low doses of enclomiphene should not increase your hematocrit levels. That's one of the benefits that it has over TRT. Only I've seen extremely high doses can cause that. But for the doses that we're using, which is typically the 6.25 and sometimes the 12.5, it shouldn't do that. Or if it does, it's talking about like a 1 or 2 point non-statistically significant increase. Now that may technically, if you're right on the border, push you technically into the high zone, but it's like a 1 point difference clinically meaningful? Probably not. But if you're concerned about it, like I said, just monitor your hematocrit levels. And if it's not moving the needle significantly, which it probably shouldn't at 6.25 milligrams, you should be fine. Obviously, consult with the physician that's in charge of monitoring your hematocrit levels. But like I said, try it. Just make sure that you're monitoring your labs. We don't measure hematocrit because we don't need to. We've actually talked to our medical advisors, and they said it doesn't statistically significantly increase hematocrit, so it doesn't need to be monitored like TRT. But if you want to be extra cautious on your own because of your genetic or personal predisposition to high hematocrit, then I would say, look, you already know what your baseline levels are. You said 50, 51. Try 6.25 milligrams of enclomiphene, retest on your own, your labs, your hematocrit after 30 days, and see if it goes up in a meaningful way. Now, I'm not talking about 1 point where it's like meaningless, but if it's obviously elevated significantly, then, you can obviously take care of it through, donating blood or other means. And if you make the decision to stay on enclomiphene, but more likely than not, it's not going to elevate your hematocrit levels. Now, I don't know exactly the acronym that you're using in terms of type 2 DM. I assume you're talking about type 2 diabetes mellitus, which is type 2 diabetes. It shouldn't have any negative adverse effects. It doesn't have any negative adverse effects on blood sugar levels, blood glucose regulation. And so it's diabetes friendly, essentially. Looks like we got some folks on Twitter Spaces. Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions about increasing your testosterone or just optimizing your health or health behaviors, let me know. Any other questions from YouTube? By the way, the folks who are watching on Instagram Live, you can feel free to type in your questions. I'm happy to answer that. I think I waved at a bunch of y'all folks. Let me see if there's anything. How long does it take for meds to ship after accepting a prescription? We send it out pretty fast. So if you get a prescription from your doctor at Maximus and it's approved, it's an electronic prescription. It gets sent to the pharmacy immediately. They usually fulfill orders in 24 hours, and then it's shipped through priority mail. So depending on where you are in the country relative to Ohio, which is where our compounding pharmacy is, you should get it within 1 to 3 business days. So let's say 2 to 4 days, including, just processing the order. So should be able to get it pretty soon. So thanks for the question. We try to move quickly. Someone on Instagram said, you guys use enclomiphene citrate. That's the best stuff for guys. I'm glad this is becoming popular. Thank you for saying so. It's interesting. Most people haven't heard of enclomiphene. Like I said, it's a relatively newly available compound, even though Clomid has been FDA approved since 1976. The purified isomer has only really been available in the last year or two, but thanks to leading doctors like Dr. Rand McClain, who's our medical advisor, who talks about it. Some of the influencers and folks on Reddit who've educated folks about the research literature. It's increasingly becoming popular. And I 100% agree. It is the best means of especially naturally stimulating your testosterone production. I talk about actually like how I use it myself, and a lot of, even our investors are on it because who doesn't want to maintain, their testicular function, fertility, unlike TRT. I always tell all guys, you want to maintain your natural testosterone production as long as you can, right? It's just the same thing with insulin. Like if you're, this guy was talking about type 2 diabetes, your goal is for your pancreas, your organs, and your testicles to work as long as you live. Now, if you get to a point where you get really, really sick, your pancreas gives out, your beta cells don't function, sure, go inject insulin. That's basically when a type 2 diabetic becomes a type 1 diabetic, when they've become very severe and ill. And that's unfortunately actually about 10, maybe 15% of type 2 diabetes patients will progress, but that's because they don't take care of themselves. Type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease for the most part. Even if you have a genetic predisposition to diabetes, you can control it. Ketogenic diets, low carb diets, maintaining a healthy weight, not eating excessive refined carbohydrates do a lot for that. In fact, there's entire companies, Verta Health, Omada Health, which I helped start as their founding medical director, use low to lower carbohydrate diets to essentially cure people of type 2 diabetes. I don't like to say, it reverses it, but I do think it puts it in remission as long as you continue to be compliant with the diet. It's the same analogy when it comes to testosterone. You want to maintain your natural testosterone production as long as possible. And even if, you're done having kids, it doesn't mean you should hop on the TRT train because you're like, fuck it, I don't care about my fertility. You should care about your testicles functioning, whether or not you want to have kids, right? I always say there's psychological power in fertility, right? It's almost like, Samson's hair. You never want to give up your virility as a man, even if you don't want to have kids, because there's some psychological potency in knowing that your one function, biological function on Earth, is to be able to reproduce. And to have that, I think, creates subconscious power. Now, there's not evidence behind that, but that's sort of my sense unconsciously as a psychologist. And also, like I said, that neurosteroid cascade, as we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, you're not just like getting a biological free lunch, jabbing yourself and replacing your testosterone. It's probably having a negative effect on the production of your neurosteroids. And so anything that you can do to maintain natural hormone production is, I think, a smarter and more conservative approach.
We had a good comment on YouTube. Hey, Dr. Cam, as a Maximus member, how can we best support Maximus to grow? The protocol has been great experience for me, and I've learned a lot from these radio shows. Would love to give back.
Thank you so much. What a great comment. And I think it just really shows the power of the Maximus community. And thank you so much for being part of it. This is literally why it's a pleasure for Victor and I to be here with you every single week. It's like, why do we hang out here in the evenings instead of our families? It's because we're serving a huge purpose in helping guys like you. And thank you so much for willing to help back. So I would say there's a couple things that you can do. Number one, tell your friends. That's the best thing that you can do. And the reason for this is, look, we designed Maximus to be a stigma-free company. I always joke that no one's going to wear a Roe or Hims hoodie around LA because it basically advertises that you have erectile dysfunction, right? Or premature ejaculation, as we were talking about. You don't want to advertise that to the world. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's obviously not something you're going to put in your dating profile, right? You'll never destigmatize, major medical conditions. I always think it's like a stupid effort. Like, oh, if I just get a, celebrity to talk about how premature ejaculation is okay, no one will care about it anymore. Of course people will care about it. We're human beings. We're judgmental. That's not how human beings work. I think it's a denial of reality to accept the fact that people, care about social status and health. Like, that's just how we are. The way that you get around it is that you don't focus on conditions. You focus around optimization and performance. Guys who are on our protocol, including myself, don't have low testosterone. We just want optimal testosterone. We want the testosterone that our fathers and our grandfathers naturally had before we polluted ourselves with these endocrine disrupting chemicals. So there's no shame about being on our protocol. That's why you can tell your friends about it. So that's what I would say is we designed Maximus to have word of mouth marketing. So if you're happy being a Maximus customer, your testosterone is where it should have been if you were born 50 to 100 years ago. That's not your fault. You just were born in the wrong time. That's why I don't think there is any shame about it, right? It's not a personal problem. It's a generational problem. And so as a result of that, you should tell your friends, be like, hey, did you know testosterone's gone down 50% over the last 50 years and it's not your fault? It's just we're all polluted. So fight fire with fire. We're getting all these xenoestrogens. Block the estrogen. Take Enclomiphene. Get on the Maximus protocol. Your energy levels will go up. Your motivation, drive, and confidence will grow up. Your ability to put on lean mass will go up. And you will be a healthier, more masculine man who's going to go out and crush it from the boardroom to the bedroom, as we like to say. So that's the best thing you can do is tell your friends about how it's changed your life, the benefits that you're getting. And that'll obviously help us do better as a company. And then we can put out better products for you. We're actually really, really excited about 2 new products that are coming out this year. I've been pitching it to investors and everyone's excited about it. I just talked to an investor, for instance, who was on finasteride, the hair loss medication that he was taking. And I was like, listen, we got something that blows finasteride out of the water. And it's going to be fantastic for your hair. And not only does it prevent hair loss, it actually promotes hair and beard growth. So, and we're using a really, really unique hormonal compound that nobody else is offering. So tell all your friends about it. Second thing that I would say is be active in the Maximus community. We have an amazing community for the folks that are listening. Even if you're not a customer, you can join it for free. It's maximustribe.com/discord. So you can download the Discord app, or you just use the web-based version. And we have all these channels, right? We have a testosterone channel where we talk about hormone optimization. We have a hair loss channel where we talk about the hair loss stuff. We have a dating channel. That's where I think the question around, partner vulnerability came up. We have a sexual health channel where we talk about, premature ejaculation or enhancing sexual function. So be active in the community. Whenever you see, I think, people post questions, obviously I respond, other members of our team respond. We have JT now, who's a health coach, who's phenomenal, by the way. If you ever have any questions about, exercise regimens, building muscle, he is a phenomenal resource as a personal trainer. You can check him out, JT Bodyweight Strength. I think it's bodyweightstrength.com. It's his personal website, but he's one of our health coaches. So, but I designed the community to not just be a bunch of professionals and experts like me and JT responding. I wanted it to be peer coaching, because here's the thing: as smart as we are, we're not experts in everything, right? There's so many other men who have amazing, great experiences. Like Victor, for instance, was someone was talking about injuries that they had, and Victor had personal experience, doing rehab with PT, and the experiences that he found beneficial. And a lot of that is value. I think that's a lot of the reason Red is popular. It's not that anecdotal experience trumps science, but it is a useful addendum to be like, well, how do you navigate the healthcare system? Like, what is the benefit of PT? Why go to a professional versus watch YouTube videos? Or here's what I found. And so, you have a wealth of wisdom, knowledge, and experience that comes from your personal life. So when you see people in the community, ask questions, answer it. Obviously, if you have, if you feel like you can be helpful. And also, if you see guys that are out there struggling, whether it's Will Smith or your next door neighbor, and they probably need a little bit of guidance, let's say, in their life, just tell them to join the community. They don't need to buy our products. That's great if they do, but really, we're trying to build better men and healthier masculinity. And so they can join the community for free. Just tell them to go to maximustribe.com/discord and have them, join as well. The bigger the community, I think the better. We have 1,500 members on our Discord. And I think when people are active and communicating and dialoguing and helping each other out, that's the beauty of what we're doing. We call it mutual improvement, not personal improvement, because I think no man needs to go at it alone. No man is an island, as the old adage says, and we prove that out by creating kind of a virtual island. I don't believe in the metaverse, but I do think there is a benefit of being online and providing, support, accountability, and wisdom to one another. And that's why we call it a tribe, right? Maximus is the company, but the community is the tribe. And I think we've built something special here. So have your friends join the community. Obviously, if they're interested in the products, tell them why it's helpful. And that's how you can support us. And finally, the last way you can support us is honestly just be a good man. Because if you are a good man, you take the higher testosterone and energy that you have, and you channel it in a way that's positive and pro-social and productive, people will look up to you, right? You're going to be a model citizen. And then people will ask, like, how are you so kind? How are you so generous? How are you so patient? How are you so benevolent? Why are you such a good brother? Why are you such a good employee? And you can say, well, here's the things that I've learned. And I get a little boost from Maximus, right? And so when people see that in the world, they'll be like, I want to emulate that guy. And the best way that I think we can, be good forces in the world, good role models in the world, is to be the best men that we can be. And I think that's the best thing that you can do to promote Maximus.
We got one final question. Again, health and medical question. Is there any issues taking tadalafil along with enclomiphene? I have gained muscles only on tadalafil. Increases testosterone? Does enclomiphene reverse type 2 diabetes if diet and exercise regime is followed?
Enclomiphene is not a diabetes drug, so it shouldn't reverse type 2 diabetes. But the health coaching that we can do can absolutely reverse type 2 diabetes. So that's part of our protocol. It's not just enclomiphene. I have a particular expertise, in fact, in uh, managing prediabetes and diabetes, given my first company. So if you really want to work on that, hop on the coaching channel, talk to me about it. I will review your diet if you track it through Chronometer, and I'll give you tips about how to optimize your diet to help lower your blood sugar levels. So uh, the protocol, the King Protocol, can help reverse your diabetes because I have a decade of experience doing that. So that's the first point. The second point was, is there any incompatibility with tadalafil or Cialis, which is a common ED drug, and enclomiphene? No, I actually think it's synergistic. It's not going to increase testosterone. It has very slight estradiol regulating effects. May increase testosterone a little bit, but not in any clinical meaningful way. The main benefit that it has is obviously it increases blood flow, improves erections, lowers blood pressure, shrinks prostate, and actually may have some interesting anti-dementia effects. We're going to actually launch a product that's like an upgraded version of tadalafil, is the way that I'll describe it. It's even better. But there's no problem with taking it now, and I actually think it's pretty synergistic with the Maximus protocol. So keep on keeping on. We got a question on Instagram. Any complaints about being sleepy after being on the protocol? I'm getting quality sleep but still feel tired in the afternoon. My question is, when are you taking it? If you are taking it in the morning, usually people will actually report a decrease in that post-afternoon slump. You can try taking it with lunch. Having a little bit of fat helps the vitamin D absorption as part of the supplement portion of our protocol. But if you really want that kind of the biggest spike in your testosterone to be closer to the afternoon, you could try experimenting with either taking it first thing in the morning with breakfast, or you could take it early afternoon with lunch. And so usually that will help. The other thing is, you can obviously talk to your doctor about potentially taking a higher dose if you want more of the energy boosting effects. But third, I would say, maybe hop on the coaching channel and we can talk a little bit more about, why your energy levels are low. Because if it's fundamentally a sleep issue, there's no drug in the world that can fix bad sleep. You know what I mean? Like, you can't sleep 4 hours a night and use Adderall to just wake you up. It doesn't negate the sleep debt, right? So if it's fundamentally a sleep issue or a lack of recovery issue or a chronic stress issue, which are the major drivers typically of fatigue or chronic fatigue in men, let's fix those underlying issues, because it's not going to be enclomiphene alone that can fix that. It'll obviously give you an energy boost, but you got to fix your sleep and stress as well. And these are synergistic things, and that's why we take care of things holistically with the protocol.
And to end the show, we got a great comment from George again. Awesome. We'll let my personal tribe know. I will increase my activity on the Discord and be the best man that I could be. Thanks a lot, gentlemen.
Thank you so much, George. I think it's such a beautiful example of the community that we're trying to build. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi said that be the change that you want to see in the world, and that's what we're trying to do here every day. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful last day of March. Go out and kick butt and enjoy a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll be here every Thursday, 6 o'clock. It's an absolute pleasure. And if you have any additional questions, post it on maximistribe.com/Discord, and I'll catch you online.